everybody, it's Christina of CraftyPaws. I'm here to share a process video with you guys on how I made this fun action wobble card. This is my second design team project for Topflight Stamps, which is a store that sells stamps from all over the world. I'm in love with these Caramel Studio stamps, which are French stamps, and this first set is called Follow Your Heart. And I am using 3 of these stamps from this set to create a background. And I'm using my Misty tool because these stamps are all brand spanking new, so they haven't been prepped yet, and I know it's going to take several impressions to get good crisp images. So first I'm removing the foam pad on the back of my Misty because these are cling mount stamps, so they've already got the foam cushion attached to the rubber. And I am using Memento Tuxedo Black ink, and I'm trying to get a pretty decent coverage, but it's going to take, I believe, 3 separate stampings to get a clean, crisp image of all of these stamps. And you might be wondering if these white rubber stamps clean well, and they absolutely do. I use a little bit of body wash actually and an old toothbrush, a soft one, and they clean up perfectly. Now I'm taking an EK powder tool and I'm prepping the background so that it doesn't have too much static, and I'm using a Versa marker, which is like Versamark ink but in a pen form, and I'm just over marking or kind of tracing portions of these stamps, the outlines, the zigzag, the bolder outlines of the hearts. And I'm using this markers because I want to add some clear embossing powder to just those areas of the background. I didn't want the whole thing to be embossed, but I did want some texture and some variation in the intensity of the black ink. And with the heat embossing, it actually makes it a little bit darker, just that glossiness. And you can see with my heat tool, it's melting really quickly. I've just used clear embossing powder from Recollections, and I really like how that adds an extra layer of texture. Now I'm taking a Tim Holtz Distress ink in Black Soot and just blending some ink on the edges of the card front. Now I'm taking some, just a little piece of foam sheet. This is from the Dollar Tree, so it's super thin, and I know this will go through the mail really well. I just wanted to add a little bit of extra dimension on this card, but have it still be flat enough to go through the mail easily. Now I'm using the 3 Oiseaux. I think that's how you pronounce it. That's birds in French. That's the stamp set that I used in my first project as well. And I'm using this crazy heart-shaped bird. And again, I'm stamping this out a couple of times with my Misty tool using Memento Tuxedo Black ink. And now I'm just going to do some quick and easy Copic coloring. What's great about these images is that there's already a clear indication of where shadows could be with just the extra kind of detail in the image itself. So I'm first putting in a layer of the lightest red I'm planning on using. This is an R14. And I'm just putting in a base coat, just making sure that I don't get into the white areas, but I can clearly cut outside of the image because I'm going to be fussy cutting the whole thing. And I used a little bit of the yellow for the beak and the feet. Now you'll be surprised, I'm using a green. This is a G14, and I found that with reds, if you want to get kind of a complementary gray tone or shadow area with red, you can use green to do that. And it looks a little bit crazy right now, but you'll see that where I am putting in the green is where I want the darkest shadows. And now I'm going over top of those green areas with a darker red. So I'm using an R27. And I find that that mutes the greenness so that it becomes more like a dark gray in those areas where I have the green. And it adds a kind of an extra depth to the coloring that you don't get with just using, 3 red tones, for example. And I'm just going in over the areas where there are details in the stamped image itself. Now I'm going back in and blending with a lighter red. I'm back to the R14. so that it connects the darker red with the lighter red, and it also coats over the green areas. And that's, you know, basically the coloring of this image. I'm using next a Uniball Signo white gel pen, and you see me marking a little bit on my index finger on my left hand, and that's just to get the ink flowing a little bit better. I am just putting in some dot, kind of flicking actually, details on this little bird where some of the detail of the stamped image has made it extra dark, and I wanted the feathers to pop a little bit more. So I'm adding these little flicks to the tips of the feathers at the top of his head, as well as on the wings, and a little bit where his legs join his body, that little pant area, I guess. And now I'm taking my favorite spring scissors. These are Fisker scissors, and I'm fussy cutting around the whole bird. And I edited out some of this fussy cutting just because I figured you guys know how to fussy cut. I'm not showing anything new there, going over right on top of the outside line. And now I'm using my Memento Tuxedo Black marker. This is a tip that I learned from Kathy Rakusin, the Daily Marker here on YouTube. She uses a Memento Tuxedo Black marker to go over the outside edge to cover the white edge of the paper. Now I'm taking an X-Acto blade and cutting out the little space between the legs. And you might think that's a crazy detail, but I actually think that it is really helpful to do those little details. And I'm using a scrap piece of paper and my Memento Tuxedo Black marker to go around the rest of the edges of the image. And for those little nooks and crannies, it's easier to turn the image backwards onto a scrap piece of paper and just use the full breadth of the brush marker. Now for a little glossy accent topping, I'm gonna put that on the eyes, the beak, and the legs. I wait for that to dry, and now I'm gonna make the action wobble mechanism. Now you can buy action wobbles in a lot of craft stores, but I like making my own. I just take some craft wire, and this is a pretty thin gauge wire. This is a 28 gauge, and if you don't know, for gauges of wire, the lower the number, the thicker the wire is. And for action wobbles, I found that really thin wire like this 28 gauge works great. And what I've done is I've just punched out 2 little circles, and I'm using some Scotch tape to adhere the bottom row of that spring to one of those cardstock circles. I'm just going to use my scissors here to cut off the excess that is off the edge of the little circle. And now I'm going to take the other one, and I've brought the camera in closer so you can see. I'm just layering in that Scotch tape just on that first lower ring of the spring. And again, I'm just going to cut off the excess, and that makes the full action wobble. That's all you need to do. Really easy peasy, right? So that's the mechanism, and I'm just going to glue that onto my card front, and then I'm gluing the top portion of that action wobble mechanism to that bird. And voila, action wobble. Now for just a little extra sparkle, I decide I'm going to add a few little sequins, some black and red, just to keep this in this monochromatic look. And I'm layering on a black sequin on top of a larger red sequin, and then up above here, I'm layering on a black sequin, a big one, and then a little one. And on top of the black big sequin, I'm going to put on a red sequin. For finishing touches like this, I like to add things in odd numbers. So you see I have 5 there. And to cover up the little sequin holes, I'm using some glitter glue. This is some Recollections Ebony, and I'm just going to go over the top of the sequin holes. Now, because I thought the background was looking too kind of clean, I wanted to make it a little bit more grungy. So I've put over a little scrap paper mask, and I'm diluting some acrylic black paint and splattering it on the background. I'm just using a stamping block and some water that's off to the side there, adding it to the acrylic paint and splattering it on. And I really like that grungier look for this particular card. And that's the full process. I hope you've enjoyed this process video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you guys are having a wonderful crafty day.